we're connected. So welcome again, Tarek.
Thank you.
Thanks for accepting our invite to have this chat.
Thanks for accepting mine initially.
Let me introduce you briefly. You are a visual and sound artist and also a composer. And yes. We met you through the 17th Istanbul Biennial, exactly. Where we had the pleasure, the privilege of contributing to your work through the recordings of harbors of Istanbul. And then in time, we realized you're a very versatile artist and a musician and a composer, let's say. And you work with different mediums at different locations. And you even build your own instruments, electroacoustic instruments. And we wanted to know you more and hear about your creative process and what fuels your inspiration, your projects. And I want to start with the classic question. So what brought you here? How did you start in the first place?
I started with music. I started with music at a late age, around 20. And with electronic music first, and then from electronic music to like sound studies I did in France after I migrated there. And from this point on, I worked initially as a musician and composer with an attention I gave to performance and live aspects. So like a lot of like interest and curiosity in jazz, in free jazz, in improvised forms that got me early on to think how to use computers, computer programming, DIY instrument making, and digital technology to build controllers, to build machines that allowed me to improvise. You see, like thinking how can the computer become like an acoustic instrument, you know, something that is versatile, something that is responsive, and that is enjoyable to watch as well in terms of like being on stage and playing live. So with these interests, I found myself moving away from concerts and like, let's say, normal composition, or this idea of like composing for albums, and going more towards live and performance, not just concerts, but like kind of performance connected with the arts as well, or things in between the two worlds of music and arts. And this is a place I found myself comfortable in, because not being a musician, I was more working with concepts, more working with abstractions and ideas that make me feel more at ease and at home in the art world than in the music world per se. And so my attention was channeled towards like residencies I was doing in art contexts, in like processes that are long-term, of like conceiving projects, imagining projects, and also like were marked from the beginning and was something I could develop in the art world with like an interest in education, in collaboration, and in working with different people and audiences over long durations of time. So those were things the art world allowed me to do, but at the same time, I was still overing and working as a musician, you see, not like as a sound or visual artist per se, but more like somebody who's coming from composition, doing sound composition. And that's something I'm still like, even today, like very attentive and connected with, is like composing music, or like starting ideas or developing ideas or performances with this sensibility and this way of doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read in one of your interviews that you don't publish albums a lot.
Yes.
You do more like live performances, improvisations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's exactly what I was also like. One of the aspects of not feeling connected with the music world was this, was on this level, is like making albums. I have only one album. I released one thing when I was like 25 or 20, 24, 25. and back then I was like, yeah, I didn't recognize myself in this format, you know, like what I was doing was much more free, was much more open for accidents, mistakes. When I enjoy it a lot, but when I listen to a recording of an improvisation, I always find it horrible. So it's like these two things that made me like say, okay, why focus on making albums and like producing things? If you enjoy live, just do what you enjoy and what you like, and focus on playing live and being in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yeah.
And where did the visual aspects come in? Did they come in time?
The visual, like the visual component, like this is something that developed over time, really. It's like also, it's like kind of getting impregnated, getting inspired by things I was encountering, like in works of visual arts. You see, like you have residencies at biennales or in museums, you see exhibitions, you meet fellow artists and people which work you like and respect. And I think over the years, this becomes like a considerable and important source of influence. But as I was saying, like initially and originally, I was attracted by abstractions, concepts, and ideas. So like this was like, I would say, like the first entry point to the world of visual arts. And then the plastic, I would mean like the visual or like the object material aspect of it is something that came really from this dimension of working with instruments and instrument making. Like that was like the way I tackled working with material, whether it's wood or metal, or also acoustic principles, whether it's working like with strings or winds or percussion. These things came from my interest and work on instruments. And as I was telling you, you see, I started early on as a student in building like controllers and instruments and machines. Actually, I have a few. For example, this is one of the early controllers I built like 15 years ago. You see, and look, it looks like this, and it's like totally handmade and fabricated. But that's something I still use today. You see, so that's a digital instrument that I did for myself, and that I am the only one who plays it this way, and it's tailored to the size of my hands and like ideas I have that I complete with an important aspect of computer programming that I also do. So from this, I moved to acoustic instruments, you see, and from this, I moved to like working with acoustic principles like strings and the winds and the skins and these sound making device that, and this happened with through collaboration with instrument makers. You see, from really all over the world, people who are interested in experimental instrument making, in the innovative ideas of like either transforming traditional instruments or building totally new ones. And that became like a very fun exploration, because I also learned a lot from makers, how they work, what are the constraints, how we choose materials, how we choose what specific woods, how we choose specific strings, how like we examine and study every component of an idea we are developing, which was already something I was doing in the digital realm. But here came the interaction with matter and material. And yes, instrument making became something I'm very attached and attentive to, and I built a lot of instruments over the last, let's say, 10 years, you know, like started with these digital things and went on to like a whole variety and scale of scope of instruments and machines.
Cool. It's very cool. And it's also interesting that I read you also have a custom-made listening mechanism at home. I think you built different monitors, speakers, where you listen to your friends' records through, you know, water, things like that.
Yes, it's not at home. I'm about to take it home now. We'll see what my wife says once I put it in the house. Yeah. That's something I've done, well, especially like it was there in Istanbul. Like these ideas were present in the work we did at the Istanbul Biennial. But it's like, let's say if we are to put things in order or like to frame them a certain way, it started with instrument making. You see, and like it started, no, it's like instrument making. But then From this, the question after you build like 40, 50 instruments, you know, and more than you can play, you're like, okay, this is all great and this is all fun, and I have years of instruments to explore now, you see. But what becomes then another question is, how do we hear? How do I give this instrument to be heard? You see, so how do we listen to these instruments? We can listen to them through speakers and through air and through the ears, but we can also listen to them through water, through the hands, and with the eyes, you know. So all these ideas like started like to be a very important concern the last, I would say, 3-4 years, of like, how do we perceive a sound, you see, not just how we play it or how we generate it, but also how do we get exposed to it. And it's not just like how acoustically it's being broadcasted or what speaker or what technology you're using, but it's also what context are you providing for it to be like heard and perceived, you see. Is it like an outdoor context in a public square with like the surrounding noise, or is it inside a white cube that is acoustically sound and like offering ideal conditions? So what is the situation? Also, are you seated or standing? Is it on a performance? Are you walking in the space and like kind of like making your own perception of it? So all these questions like became also like of very important relevance, and something I started to work on and develop. And here came the ideas of like not like of like indirect listening or indirect perceptions of sounds and of instruments and of like all these beautiful machines and mechanisms I built. So through objects of the daily life, and that became like super fun of like, okay, like not always looking for high fidelity or very like the best rendering of a sound and falling into this kind of like technical race, but more like thinking the other things that we tend to forget when we are sometimes too much taken by technique or by these optimization.
Yes. And I also like how you invite the viewer to be a part of it, how to experience it, like the way you want it to do. Like I saw people lying on the stones in one of your exhibitions, just listening to how the sound comes through the stone, the wood, the overall environment, or even outside, like you say.
Yes.
And do you get like feedback from the viewers, and do they actually feed your new projects, other works, or how you change that project during its exhibition?
Yes, like ideally, not all the time, to be honest, no, not all the time. There are things where I have less interaction with the viewers, and ones where I do have, and where like I really try to be close. Let's take for example the project at Istanbul Biennial, Whispering Playground, for instance. It's an installation on which there are, as you know, the sounds of the Istanbul harbors, some of which you have with, and I'm very thankful for the amazing job you did. Harbors, plus water sounds, plus sounds of records or like other musics that are playing into this in a hammam, in a very old hammam in the Kutchuk Mustafa. And you enter, and it's like a listening space. You see, it's like really an installation that you can listen to. You can walk around, you can lay down, as you were saying, like these possibilities are there and offered. And at the same time, it is an educational piece. It's like a is there for kids, you see, and for students to interact with like I believe we did about 20 workshops during the Istanbul Biennial or something like this. And that's for me is already like an amazing ideal situation. But in a context like this one, I really try as much as I can to get feedback and like to like see what happened, you see, because this allows the work to be developed further. It allows you to like to fine tune what it means to like for people to work with pieces like these. So the feedback of the audience is sometimes very important, and not the audience. There are like situations and cases where it's feedback of musicians I invite to play like an instrument or to play in a given context, and like their perception of this allows me to finish work or to finish an installation. There are works and installations I've done that took years, because first we built the instruments, then we invited musicians to play on them, and like from how every musician played and what they did, like this inspired me ideas of how they could be put together in a form and instead they played without the musicians, and so on. So sometimes there is this process where inviting people, creating moments of education, performance, become almost like a research moment as well, that allows them to find ideas, to understand things, to improve situations, and to push the work towards finalized forms or up to improve things in it generally. Finally finish it and improve it.
Yeah. And so this Istanbul project is actually in a series of other harbor recordings in different areas, like Athens,
right,
like Beirut, I think.
Yes.
And when you compare those different harbors, different locations, when it comes to Istanbul, do you have like different specific elements which shape the work?
Yeah. Yes, totally. Like the process of recording sounds is part of a long idea I've been developing called Water's Witness. And on Water's Witness, what is happening is that we're traveling to important cities that started as harbors, so places as you mentioned, Athens, Beirut, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, and record the harbor and what's around it, not just the harbor or like but sometimes you find natural reserves, sometimes you find like different military bases, industries. So also paying attention to what's around the harbor in the close periphery. And the idea was like from the harbor, like, or from these sounds, we can learn a lot about what is happening in the case of Istanbul, you see, like, well, let's say previously in the other cases, when I went to Beirut, there is one harbor. When I go to Singapore, there is harbor. Like Istanbul, there were like 12 harbors. So I say, I want to record the harbor of Istanbul. They're like, great, but which one? They're like, wow, it's amazing. Like already the city and its geography is huge, but like the city and its relation to waterfront is how central it is, and like connecting Asia to Europe to Africa. Like it's really from Istanbul, things go all over the world and are super complex because these 12 harbors, well, already this is just going to take us years, you know. Yeah. And that's the idea of inviting you and inviting other people, of saying this is a situation we cannot take on our own. So for the first time, we collaborated with other people to be able to do it, you see. Mm-hmm. So that's one reality. And the second reality we observed with the Istanbul harbors is that, well, there are concessions for China, there are concessions for Qatar, there are concessions for from different places and connected to different geographies. And there are also like very old harbors, you see, that's been here for like 400 or 500 years and still operating. So that, and like ones that are goes a radius of like 2-3 hours away from the center of Istanbul. If you go to Tuzla and beyond, there are still harbors. So like, wow, this is never going to end. But we did it. We did it. We, you know, we remember we started. It was like kind of the pandemic, and like the project took like this recording phase took time, and the pandemic kind of allowed it because the exhibition got postponed, and things played in our favor somewhere.
It was an amazing experience. I don't think we'll get to experience that harbor recordings that extensively again, because as you said, all of them were different. Ambarlı, the biggest one, was actually gave us a perspective of how important that port is to Istanbul and even the rest of Turkey. So it's also got a social element, a political element, and it's both epic and also in a way dystopian, because if the operation stops for one day, then you get like, you have a week's reserve of, you know, goods for the city, and then it makes like 80% of all the shipping to the city and the surrounding area. So it's frightening in a way. And then we went to Poyrazköy, the fishing village, the small village. And we see it's like time back, like the old days. There are the fishers having their own protected life, just an hour from Istanbul city center. And they're just fishing in the old way and waiting for the season and not doing much in between. It was very interesting.
Yes. No, totally. Like in our case, like when we went there with my collaborator with whom I usually record, like the other harbors, Eric Lacasa, we went to Tuzla, you see, and in Tuzla was like the shipyards. This was like really like the industrial, like hardcore industrial part of harbors, where it was a lot about ship repair, ship dismantling, like the industry of taking care of ships. And there for me, like it was amazing, not just in terms of sounds, but just in terms of seeing where all the ships come from, like they really come from places that are off the map for the Western world, like from Africa, from Southeast Asia, from the Gulf, and then they show like from Russia even, and showing how much, like showing like for me, like I really saw something that is like the industrial strength of Turkey in a way. You see, you say, wow, like so there's also like here heavy industries, there is like human potential, you see, working conditions that are, of course, you can maybe criticize, or needs more syndicalism, is more to be more protection and security and whatsoever, but still at the same time there's a human and production force you feel that is very, very strong, you see, and it tells you a lot about Turkey is going through, you see, like about like how these workers think. It speaks about, I don't know, nationalism. It speaks about like people's it's past and present. So no, for us Tuzla was amazing in that sense as well, to get a sense of what's on the inside of Turkey somehow from this specimen, like this sample that is Tuzla.
Great. We loved it. I mean, is this the last let's say port on this project, or will you continue doing these in different cities?
No, it's continuing. Like now we're preparing at the moment to go record Sydney and the harbor of Sydney in Australia, and then slowly once a year is already a lot. A harbor a year is great. So we have one for 23, and we will see later. But yes, has a harbor. Actually, every 1 or 2 years there's a harbor somewhere.
There's a harbor, yeah. And how do you choose these locations?
Well, they come to us. Like in the beginning, you start the project, you have the world map, and there are lots of harbors that are of interest and of like, very meaningful. And the more you do, the less then you start to become. But no, so far, like we have done like about 8 or 9, and no, there's still a lot to do. So through invitations that come for exhibition makings or on biennales, or like it depends. Like when I get invited to a place that has an interesting harbor or is close by it, I propose this idea. And I think in the coming years, I'll start to see what is missing. You see, like I haven't done something in Latin America. I would like to do something in China or in Northeast Asia. Let's see. Africa, I haven't done any harbor yet. So yeah, we'll become more selective and try to do it on our own and not just wait for invitations. But it's hard without invitations. Honestly, it's hard. You saw how much like what is the procedure? You need an inviting organism. You need permits. You need declarations. You need like our harbors are not easy to access. And we tried like in some countries we couldn't do it because no one was able to give us permits to go to the harbor.
Yeah, the security was amazing.
Yeah.
And also you need to protect yourself because there's a heavy operation going on. But then to get those, really interesting sounds, you need to get close
Yes.
to even the ships which take off or just getting in the harbor. And sometimes there are military ships coming in and they're overprotected,
Yeah.
We also had the chance to, see another, military ship coming into Turkey, to Istanbul, for a meeting, for example.
Yes.
So you actually see, you actually see another country floating into the city because
Yes.
there's another country's land,
Yeah. But let's also frame it. This was you were there in summer
21, yeah.
21,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The war between Russia and Ukraine hadn't, so there wasn't still this kind of military action, and now it must be very busy, militarily speaking.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Yeah, the COVID actually gave us, it looked like it was restricting, but it gave us a lot of, independence in what we were doing. People weren't interested in that kind of stuff. Usually when you're, field recording or location recording, people really disturb you. They're interested, they want to get in and ask what you're recording, what you're going to do with that. So it's difficult to concentrate, but it was the hottest summer. I remember it was August, and people were just trying to digest what the COVID meant and if they're going to survive or not. And we were after the, best sounds. We were in a parallel world,
Right.
Yeah, great experience. And thank you for the opportunity again. I want to ask if, in the future, you have like a few or one project that you really wanted to do.
In the future, one project that I really want to do. Let's see. Well, there are several ones, but there is no like attachment to anyone, because you see projects come and go, ideas come and go. Like, it's okay. Better not be stubborn with this. But there is like a trajectory that is manifesting itself with desires, with experiences, with also like when you just sometimes come to the studio and ask yourself, okay, what do I feel like working on today? You see, it's definitely not writing email. It's definitely not answering calls. Or so is it like composition? Is it like working? You see, and like when I ask, and that's maybe the important questions, like from asking yourself what do you want to do in the day, you start seeing what is expecting you in the future. You see, and so what I feel things are heading towards is that these instruments and these listening device or listening technique or these ideas would come together, and start to dialogue with each other, you see, and like kind of connecting different ideas and different things I had been working and with and developing. And also in parallel to this, getting this closer to the world of composition, to the world of music. So kind of breaking more and more the barriers, between like music and sound and visual arts and all this. But so that's something I'm very excited about. And another thing I'm also super excited about is to be able, with all modesty and humbleness, because I don't come from there and I'm learning also in this field, is to tackle sculpture, to think about sculpture and to think about materials, and in a way. So try a way of sensing the world now with touch, with materials, always through sound, but like this, like kind of expanding senses.
Interesting. It also sounds like and maybe humble advice to people who will start new in this area, like sonic arts.
Like as an advice, just ask yourself, what do you feel like doing on a daily basis?
No, I love this improvising approach you bring to your work, but it's like a controlled improvising. So there is a, you know, a bigger theme going on, but then coming to work, you know, just checking what you want to do that day. It's also got a philosophy in itself. I like that.
Yeah. Like every improvisation needs structure, even when you're totally in free improv. All the things that you worked on in the past and all the technique and like virtuosity you've acquired that is at your service in the present moment. So there is structure in everything you see. And I'm not saying it's not about doing what you don't want to do. You should do. Sometimes you have to do what you don't feel like doing, but it's important to know what you would like to do, or at least to keep this as something that is a reminder always in the back of your head of not forgetting or neglecting these things. You see, because this is what we.
Amazing. It gave me some more inspiration as well in parallel.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add before we close?
No, like maybe just honestly, like from my end is to thank you, like every doing the work you do, and like really this generosity and openness to working with me on this, and also maybe to thank the Istanbul Biennale's team and bringing us together, you know, and for all the work they've put and the heart they've put into making the Whispering Playground and this ambitious idea of recording Istanbul's harbors possible. And there is also like a partner we found along the way, that's the Wuslat Foundation, who helped us with the workshops and the education and all the things that happened during the course of the Biennale through their generous listening program. So yes, it's you three that I would like to thank mostly, and also the people of Istanbul. I saw a lot of people at the Biennale. I got to see how important and curious, like how curious people were, and like how important the Biennale is. So yeah, I thank you all for this, and I wish, and I'm sure I'll be back to Istanbul with more things, and we will meet again.
Let's keep recording together.
Yes,
so
exactly. We stop this recording, but continue the other one.
Exactly. On the field. Thank you, Tarek, so much, and good luck with the future work as well.
Great, my pleasure.